Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday morning. This will be our first session in the 7-part series. As was mentioned, and I'll just reiterate if the message was lost, you're welcome to attend one of these sessions. You're welcome to attend a few of these sessions. You're welcome to attend all of these sessions, whatever works with your schedule. My name is Nicole Medor. I'm the Early Childhood Specialist here at the Department of Education. My colleague Marcy is with us as well. Marcy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Marcy Whitcomb. I am the Early Childhood Monitor at the Department of Education on the Early Learning team. My role essentially will be to visit pre-K classrooms and programs and around compliance and just support everybody in the field around high quality programming.
Thanks, Marcy. And my apologies, I just realized I didn't have my microphone on, so you could hear me before though, okay? Is that true?
Yep, everything.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So a few housekeeping items. A link to the guidebook was provided via email. If you need that link, here it is again. I put this just in as a shorter link so that if you needed to type it, you could. And actually, Marcy, would you mind throwing that link in the chat box for folks if you get a second?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. A 1-hour contact certificate will be available at the end of every meeting. So the very last slide before we end at 10 o'clock will provide you a link as well as a QR code. If you are not able to access the link or the QR code, please email me after the fact, and I'm happy to provide that via email. At any time, please feel free to unmute yourself. You can ask questions. We encourage you to please interrupt us. We don't want this to be a sit and get situation. We really want to have open communication, back and forth conversation. So also feel free to use the chat box feature if that's more comfortable for you. And we also have not scheduled a break during this 1-hour session, so please take care of any personal needs at any time for yourselves. We are recording, and every recording will be made available after the fact, and I can show you where those will be housed on our main DOE Early Childhood webpage. So this is just a quick reminder of our 7 sessions that are scheduled. Today's the 16th, of course, so we'll be looking at the standards section as well as the program structure. So if you do have access now to the pre-K guidebook, you'll find these on pages 1 through 6. Marcy and I don't ask, necessarily that you come prepared. If you're so inclined, fantastic, but it's not needed necessarily. We're happy to go through these during these 1-hour sessions. And the other sections are listed there every Wednesday through July 28th. Okay, locating the pre-K guidebook. So if you go to our website, which is the main.gov/DOE, and the rest of the address is listed there for you, you'll see come to a page like this, and over on the right hand side of that page is where the visual and the link is provided for the guidebook. So you'll see the cover page here, and you should just be able to click right on it, and it'll open it up in a separate PDF site, I guess, for lack of the word, and you can download it from there if you prefer to have it saved on your computer or to print it out. Totally up to you. And some quick context about this guidebook. So to be honest, this came up quite a few years ago when we were talking a lot at the department about having coaches available for teachers, not necessarily just pre-K teachers, but educators in general, and what coaching provides as ongoing learning in the classroom for educators. And I sort of jokingly said, well, every coach has a playbook, right? If you think of a basketball coach, a football coach, a softball coach, They have a book that guides their plays, that guides how they should set up the field, offense and defense, and what's going to work best in those situations. So sort of jokingly, I said, our educators, our public programs need a book. They need a coach's book, right? So this sort of stemmed from that. Some time has passed, and maybe a silver lining of the pandemic provided us a chance to really start to focus and get this guidebook out to the field. It is 100% a resource. It is not anything that anybody with a public pre-K classroom has to implement necessarily. It's really meant to just guide and further discuss what we at the department consider high quality programming, high quality settings, high quality instruction, high quality enrollment, etc. So if you have a pre-K program that's running smoothly and has been for years, fantastic. These are simply ways that can either validate your program as is now, or perhaps encourage you to think outside the box or to further improve any parts of that programming. Any questions thus far? Just give it another 10 seconds.
Actually, hi, this is Mary Beth. Just a quick question. Maybe it's not pertinent right now, but we are starting our 6th year. So will DOE be back this year? Will you folks be back to do a program review?
Good question, Mary Beth. So I assume you're talking about the pre-K monitoring. So our hope is that yes, you heard Marcy introduce herself. That's Marcy's role. We're hoping that we will be given clearance to go back into public schools this coming school year. Looking at the way things are coming back to life, so to say, it seems promising that that'll happen. As of right now, however, we still do not have authority to go into public schools. So I'm optimistic that will change. Assuming that changes and Marcy can get back to doing her role at the department, right, which is providing technical assistance in person to the field. How that will look and how that will come about is yet to be determined, but those conversations have begun on our team. We're just sort of waiting to see how the rest of the summer unfolds in terms of requirements for social distancing and masking, etc., and what our commissioner and front office allows moving forward into the new school year. So we'll see. We still have a lot of public pre-K classrooms that have not had a monitoring visit. So I feel confident in saying that those would likely take priority over ones that have already had a visit. But that certainly could change.
I'll just piggyback off that and add that it also will depend on the comfortableness of schools being open to having visitors. So we're, like Nicole had said, we are not allowed at this point to go into schools, but that's also going to depend when we get the okay to do that, if schools are comfortable having outside visitors. And we just don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Yes, thank you, Marcy.
Morning, I have a quick question about that. What is the monitoring visit? Is it from, like Marcy, you said, I'm at school today, so I got logged on. Today's my last day. And I logged on a little late, sorry. But who does it and what is it? If you can just briefly tell me.
Sure.
Go ahead, Marcy. Do you want to speak to that?
I'll speak to it. This is going to sound a little silly, but I have been in this role for a year, and I actually started the day that the schools closed last year. So I haven't actually done the actual role yet. I have been doing a lot of research and have some background and that sort of thing. There is a section on our website, on the Early Learning Public Preschool page website, where you can find the standards for monitoring. It's also part of the guidebook, which we'll cover, I think, near one of the end sessions. Essentially, there is some information that's gathered that is sent to us, including daily schedules, information on curriculum assessment, that sort of thing. And then we schedule a visit, and within that visit, I will come in and do a class observation. This is also part of the in the guidebook. And basically what that is observation. It's 4 20-minute observations with about 10 and 15 minutes in between for scoring. And it's an observation based around positive interactions and enhancing children's understanding and learning and opportunities and that sort of thing. That is basically done to guide best practice and to inform your practice in what is happening currently in your classroom and next steps to and strengths and goals, that sort of thing. And then I feel like I'm missing a step because, like I said, I haven't actually really done this yet. What am I missing, Nicole?
So the monitoring process stems from Chapter 124, which is linked here on our public preschool page. And part of that rule chapter, it talks about having programs being monitored. So like Marcy just said, it's about providing input and feedback around what's already happening in your program. It is not meant to be like a gotcha type situation, more of a how is it going? How can we provide support? What do you need as a teacher? What does your principal need as an administrator? What does your classroom need as an environment, etc.? And it's been a really fantastic way for us on the early learning team to get out in the field and meet and learn and interact with the teachers and the students. That's the perk of the job. So like I said, it comes off, for lack of better wording, I think, to be more policey, and it's truly not. It's meant to build on our relationships and build on quality in our main preschool program. So
That's awesome. Thank you. Because I'm in a public school and we have literacy coaches and other coaches that come in, but unfortunately they really don't have the training in early childhood and they've never even heard of Chapter 124. So
yes, that is, we hear that a lot. So
yeah,
totally get it. Yeah.
So this is great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, Mary Beth, again, another quick question where we've developed an outdoor classroom is, and we can absolutely have visitors come that, especially in the fall, but are there new guidelines for any of the outdoor? I mean, I know it's really specific how many picture books and where the picture books are placed and all that with starting up a pre-K, but are there things they'd look for in a safety or anything in an outdoor classroom?
No, as of right now, we don't have any specific guidelines for outdoor classrooms. The only thing in 124 that would sort of maybe oversee that is the square footage allowed per student, but assuming you're outside, 75 square feet per child is ample space, and I don't think would be difficult if you're providing an outdoor learning space to meet that standard. I'm sure it's well above and beyond that amount of square feet per child. With that said, the instructional pieces would still be looked for in terms of, and we'll get to some of this as we move through today in the program standards, but curriculum assessment, those types of things would still be expected to be in place, but just would be a little different in an outdoor space, which is great. Outdoor learning has been a huge topic of conversation during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And we have a lot of programs in Maine that operate that way, both public and private. And so we've really developed over the course of the last few years some beautiful resources that we can share and provide to programs interested in including outdoor learning in their classrooms. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move us on in the interest of time here. So on page 1, now I just wanted to clarify too, the first few pages of the pre-K guidebook has, the index, the introduction, etc. So page 1 starts a few pages in. It's not necessarily the page right after the index. So if you're looking and you're following along with us, just wanted to reiterate that you have to flip a few pages or scroll a few pages to get to the actual page 1 where it discusses standards. So here we are just wanting to highlight the difference between standards because we have two. The first we just mentioned briefly is the Rule Chapter 124, which is our basic approval standards for public preschool programs. Some of you may be familiar or perhaps not, but kindergarten through 12th grade basic approval standards is Chapter 125. So that's where you'll find information for public classrooms in that grade span. Preschool was not included in 125, therefore we have our own, which is 124. It's been in place since 2015. We've discussed making some upgrades and renovations, so to speak, for it. That work has not gone much further in that our legislature, it's a whole process to get Rule Chapter 124 changed. It's not just something we can say, oops, let's edit and update this and then renew it to the field. It has to go through multiple sources and multiple levels of approval and authority to get it up and out. So for right now, it is as written. Nothing has changed at any time during the pandemic or in the or since 2015. It's the same. So in there, you'll find a variety of sections that highlight different parts of a public preschool program, specifically around curriculum and assessment purposes, which, like I said, we'll get to, ratios of classrooms, teacher certification needs, classroom sizes, transportation, you name it, it's all in there. So this is truly just a standards document for the actual preschool program. Unlike that, we also have our learning standards, right? So our mains, early learning and development standards, which are lovingly called the MELDs. Those are also highlighted in this section on page 1. So this is the document that I'm sure many of you are familiar with that highlights where we expect children on the broad scope of learning and development to be at the end of a school year, at the end of the year. So the MELDs spans 3 years old through 5 years old, and it's color coded. So the end of pre-K, let me grab mine real quick. At the end of the public pre-K school year, you'd be looking at the maroon column. And so I keep saying end of school year because that's really important to note. So these learning standards, you know, it's not uncommon for teachers to look at here in the maroon column and think that students need to identify how people help keep them safe in dangerous situations in September, right? That's not expected. However, at the end of the school year, the expectation is that standard was addressed in one way or another throughout the school year, so that as the student leaves pre-K and enters kindergarten, they're better equipped to meet that learning standard. That's just a random one that I picked from the page I landed on. And then you'll also see in the purple column is the end of kindergarten standards. So similar to the end of pre-K, end of kindergarten. Now I will say that all of our content standards, math, ELA, science, social studies, have recently been updated. So what you see in our MELDs in the purple column for end of kindergarten have been edited a pinch. They're not so vastly different that we should X out or scratch out any of them. However, if you're a teacher and you're moving from pre-K to K perhaps, or you work closely with your kindergarten team, just know that on our content site, on our DOE early learning site, excuse me, on our DOE content learning site, standards are updated there. So just wanting to draw attention to the two different types of standards. So before I move us on, any questions or clarifications needed around that?
Nicole, when did you say that they were updated, the standards?
The other content standards, so they do them in cycles. So ELA and math were updated and accepted in 2019, I want to say. VPA, visual performing arts, and science and social studies were also updated and accepted more recently, 2020 perhaps. Okay. My dates are not exact, but ballpark. So they're newer. So the idea being that the MELDs also will go through an update. They were scheduled to be updated this year, well, last year, 2020. But given everything that's been happening, and then also that the content standards were also being revamped, we thought, let's let all of the content standards update, and then we'll go in and align the MELDs to those. And also, which has been a benefit, the infant toddler guidelines have also been recently updated. So when we go to update the MELDs in the next year, year and a half or so, we'll be sort of the last column. So we'll be able to take infant toddlers, align that to 3 to 5 year olds, and then align that to kindergarten, etc. on up. So it worked
Great.
out. Yes, thank you, Marcy. I'm just checking the chat real quick. So the MELDS document here, I'll go back just a moment to when you're on our public preschool homepage. Over here in the left-hand column under public preschool, you'll see this tab that says standards. This is not a live document here on the screen, it's just a picture, but if you select the standards tab, that'll open up to the MELDS, and you can download or print from there. We may have some hard copies left at the department that we can mail out to folks. I can't mail to private homes, but if you give me a school address, I can mail to schools. So if you want a hard copy that looks like this with the blue cover and is bound on the side, just shoot me an email and I'll see what we have available to mail out. Okay, moving forward into the section in the guidebook titled Program Structure. So program structure covers all of these topics, which is a lot. And in the next 39 minutes, we're going to do our best to sort of cover these. So Marcy and I will take turns presenting and discussing and pausing for questions. Like we said, please use the chat box. Please unmute and interrupt us. As much as I love the sound of my voice and Marcy's voice, I want to interact with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, I believe, to Marcy for program hours on page 2.
Thanks, Nicole. So we're going to start with kind of the basics of program structure, and the program hours are one of the first things that we talk about. There is a compliance of Chapter 124 that we'll talk about at the end. But as research has shown, full day, full week programming is the best choice for high quality programming, which is what we're trying to achieve. And research shows us that children who attend full day programs generally have higher scores and kindergarten readiness and increased attendance in school. Chapter 124 does include a minimum of a 10-hour-a-week instructional program, which should be scheduled over the 35-week period and within the 175-day required student days on a public calendar. And so while Chapter 124 has a minimum of a 10-week, it's really important to keep in mind the full day, full week and the benefits of that. It's also important to keep in mind a community and parent needs assessment around that, because not all SAUs or community partners will be able to have the capacity to do a full day, full week, or have families that require that or want that. And so it's important to know what your community is looking for as well around that.
Thanks, Marcy. And I'll just add to that too, the 10 hours a week, our districts, as I'm sure many of you are witness to, are very creative in how they accommodate that. So we do have a lot of programs that operate half day or half week. So they might go 4 half mornings and 4 half afternoons. They might go 2 full days. The districts are very creative meeting this 10-hour-a-week expectation. With that said, there are a number of programs that operate far more hours per week than 10, all the way up to 20, 25, and 30 hours a week. So that's what we mean when we say full day, full week. It's 5 full days. It sort of mirrors the programming that's available to kindergarteners and etc. on up. And then the other thing I would point out too, the 35-week period and the 175 student days aligns with the K-12. So essentially saying that public pre-K will operate September through June along with the same calendar that your K-12 students have access to as well.
Thanks. So moving on to educator certifications and classroom ratios, which do kind of go together. Again, these are Chapter 124 compliance, so you can find these in the Chapter 124 standards. So public pre-K programs and classrooms, including those in community partnerships, which may not be housed within the public school, must maintain a 1 lead teacher that's holding an 081 certification, which is a birth to 5 certification, and then 1 staff assisting that has at least an EdTech 2 credential. In some areas and communities in our state, this could be a hardship based on population finding a certified or credentialed employees, staff, that sort of thing. And so we do offer waivers on a case-by-case basis, depending on, if you can display what the hardship is and that sort of thing to us. So maximum class size, according to Chapter 124, is 16 students. And we do know from research that lower ratios are a key indicator of high quality programs, and children get more one-on-one interactions with teachers and educators and adults in the classroom, and it leads toward their engagement and the safety in the environment to have lower ratios. So we do a 1-to-8 ratio during academic portions of the school day, and that's important to note because there are portions of the school day that are non-academic, including outdoor time, meal times, rest time, and allied arts times. Those particular times could possibly be a higher ratio, maybe a 1-to-10 maximum, and does not have to be overseen by a lead teacher. So you could have 2 ed techs in the classroom during those times that are not academic. The other thing that's really important to note is that if you have children in your classroom with identified disabilities and have an IEP, going through CDS to have supports around those needs are the best way to do that. And it's very important to understand that anybody who comes in to work with a child with a IEP or a identified disability would not count in the overall student to teacher ratio. So if you have a one-on-one aide, if you have an SDI person, if you have a speech therapist, when they're in the classroom, they do not count in the ratio of 1-to-8. So that's a really important consideration.
Yeah. Thanks, Marcy. We get asked a lot too, and especially from our smaller programs or more rural programs, about the ratio. So if you are working in a public pre-K and you don't have enough students in your community to fill a classroom with 16 students, of course that's okay. If you're only enrolling maybe 6 or 8 students, then there wouldn't be a need to have 2 staff, right? So that 8 student and 1 staff member would meet that ratio. Of course, the expectation would be that that 1 staff member is the lead teacher holding the 081 certification. And we know, regardless of class size and ratio, like Marcy was saying, that teachers have, of course, contractual requirements for breaks and lunch and planning time, etc. So those are the times of the day where we want to work with programs, not against you, and understand if the 081 is not available and another ed tech or another staff member of the school is overseeing and assisting with, like Marcy said, nap time, allied arts, etc. Just wanted to address a question in the chat real quick from Monica, asking if public pre-K will change the minimum hours required in the future. So that's a really great question. To be fully transparent, that conversation has come up a number of times. We held a public comment section or session, I mean, for community members and staff members working in early childhood to give us their feedback around variety of all of the sections of Chapter 124. But one that was a common topic of discussion was the minimum hour requirement of 10 hours a week. So that is something that was clear that should be addressed. How it should be addressed, we'll see. I am would propose and support more minimum hours per week for all of the reasons Marcy said on the last slide, and what research tells us in high quality program and timing, what we know that the outcomes that provides for students and the support that gives for families who are working. So we'll see. It's something that we can propose, and whether or not that's part of the change that gets approved down the line, is to be seen. So.
There's one more thing I wanted to add after I just glanced over my notes. It's also possible in certain areas or certain communities where you maybe have 17 children who would qualify age-wise to be in a public pre-K program, and you have 1 classroom. So it's really important to note that even though the maximum class size is 16 students, you can obtain a waiver based around a parent need assessment, community assessment, that sort of thing, for up to 18. And we don't really go higher than that, but adding 1 or 2 children instead of leaving them out is always best practice. So I wanted to make sure that that was out there also.
Okay, if there's no other questions regarding those two pieces, I'll move on to enrollment policies. You'll find this on page 3. There's also an appendix, Appendix B, that provides an example of enrollment policies. So there's some myths and some facts that I thought would be worth sharing with folks. So one of the myths is that I, meaning the public pre-K program, must have an enrollment policy. So that's not necessarily true. We don't collect enrollment policies. We don't see that one exists necessarily. However, you, the pre-K program, should consider having an enrollment policy, especially if you're not a universal program. So a universal program is kind of similar to kindergarten, right? Any child who's age eligible for pre-K is enrolled and supported in the pre-K program. In some communities, that's possible and is happening. And so there's no need for an enrollment policy, because if you want to come, we have the space, we have the staff, we can meet Chapter 124 requirements, and all is well and good. In many communities, that's not the case. So because of class size, because of ratio, because of sheer space in a building or in a community partner's space, we have to decide who we're going to enroll. So this is where you should consider having an enrollment policy. So down at the bottom here, you'll see some of the more common options for enrolling. So like I said, some programs are universal. No need for a policy because all who sign up are welcome and able to come. Some programs that are not universal work on a first come, first served basis. So they'll let their community members know that registration for pre-K is open, and they'll take, you know, all of your registration and application packets, and as they're received in completion, then those students will be enrolled up until they fill their seats. Some districts will do a lottery prioritization system. This is one that I'll talk about more in just a minute. And some do random. So they'll put all of their applicants' names in a box, or, you know, they'll do it digitally, however they do it, and they'll just pull a number of students that they can enroll at random. So again, whatever you choose, whatever your program does for enrolling, consider a policy around that. So enrollment policies, this is a myth. Enrollment policies are one size fits all. No. The fact is that enrollment policies should, right, this is a recommendation, should reflect your school-wide demographics. So this is what Appendix B in the guidebook sort of highlights. And this also speaks to the lottery prioritization process. So your school-wide demographics, meaning your special education percentages, your students who qualify for free and reduced lunch percentages. So for example, in your K-12 system, if you have 10% of students who qualify for special education services, try and mirror that 10% in your pre-K classroom. So if you're allowed to have 16 students and you can meet that ratio with 2 adults, then you might have 1 or 2 seats saved for students coming in who already have an IEP through CDS perhaps. Knowing and understanding, of course, that as the school year starts and as you move through your weeks and your curriculum, it's very possible that other students who are enrolled and don't have an IEP show signs of concern, and you refer for special education, and they do qualify for services. And that's all well and good. Perfectly fine. So if your K-12 school-wide demographic for free and reduced lunch is, say, 20%, then trying to mirror that in your pre-K classroom, meaning saving seats for 4 or 5 students who qualify for free and reduced lunch services, right? So we want that sort of heterogeneous mix of students in the pre-K classroom. And sometimes that's difficult to do if you're utilizing a first come, first served or a random pick. So lottery prioritization is a really great way to ensure that heterogeneous mix of students in a space. And again, that Appendix B will sort of show you some wording and show you some ways that you could write a policy showing that type of prioritization. So another myth, enrollment policies are in-house documents. The fact is that enrollment policies should be made public, right, and accessible to all families. Ideally, whatever you decide to do for your pre-K classroom will be made known to incoming families before they register, because then they can make the informed decision of whether or not this is something that is going to work for their family or not. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment and answer any questions if that sparked any. Okay, hearing none and seeing none in the chat box, again, always interrupt. We'll move on to curriculum. This section will be found on page 3. So the main DOE, we do not endorse the use of any specific curriculum pre-K through 12th grade. This is entirely a locally determined decision. We do have some expectations around curriculum and what you choose. However, we can't say use this, not that, or we endorse this, not that. So no matter who you contact at the department, we will all respond with, let me help you make an educated decision. However, the ultimate choice is up to you and your local school board and curriculum committees. So for pre-K, we do require that curriculum be evidence-based. So what does that mean? Whoops, I hit the wrong little thing here. Here we go. So there's sort of 3 levels to what evidence-based, and this comes out of it's an ESSA definition, a federal definition of evidence-based, not mine, and not Maine's. So the first thing that we would look for, or an option, would be that the curriculum you're choosing, it demonstrates a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes. So basically saying that the curriculum has been researched and studied and shows evidence of positive outcomes for students. And then under that, there's 3 tiers. So it might show strong evidence from at least one well-designed, etc. It might show moderate evidence, or it might show promising evidence. So this really opens the doors for what curriculum could be used in your classroom setting. Another definition piece for evidence-based is that it demonstrates a rationale based on high-quality research findings, or includes ongoing efforts to examine the effects of such activity. So it doesn't have to meet all of these, it only has to meet one of these, which is a big change from when we originally wrote chapter 124 and what our original definition of evidence-based was at that time. So now we need to follow the federal definition, which is what this says. This would also ultimately too, I'll say that this sort of replaces the need for saying research-based. Before there was a difference between evidence-based and research-based. Now they've sort of morphed them into this long run-on option here. So when we talk about choosing an assessment for pre-K, chapter 124 says that it has to be research-based. And I would argue that this is also the definition of that. So unless or until we get that wording changed in 124, specifically, this is our definition that we're going with. There is a curriculum consumer report. So this is linked in the guidebook. It is a hyperlink if you're looking at it digitally. If you're looking at it in paper form, then there's a hyperlink page towards the end of the guidebook that'll sort of spell out what this is. So the curriculum report is on the National Head Start site. And this is just something that we offer as a resource, and we encourage folks to look at when deciding on curriculum for their pre-K classrooms. Ultimately, it highlights a number of different curriculum that you can purchase. There is one on there that does not come at a cost, which I'll talk about in a second. The others do have a cost, and they look at it in a variety of, to a rubric in a variety of different topics and things. So you can compare one curriculum to another based on what this team has decided. And on that curriculum consumer report, you'll see pre-K for me. K for me is not on there just yet, but pre-K for me is within the Curriculum Consumer Report, and many of you know that this is our open source curriculum for Maine. Yes, it can be used in any state. However, professionals in Maine wrote and tweaked the Boston curriculum for our students here in our state. So Pre-K for Me is free, meaning that you have full access to all lessons in this curriculum. It's a 6-unit study, or excuse me, it has 6 units of study for Pre-K students. The only cost associated would be for specific furniture, specific materials, if you choose to print anything, things like that, which I would argue most pre-K programs that are of high quality already have these things, already have this furniture, already have these materials in their classrooms. So it's very possible that there will be little to no cost to implement Pre-K for Me. This also is on our website, on that early childhood website. More
Cool.
recently, yes.
I have a quick question. How long has the Pre-K for Me been available?
So all last year, okay, you're gonna test my dates here.
Well,
So we wrote Pre-K for Me and then piloted it in the 18-19 school year. And then it became available on our website the summer, oh gosh, was it 2020 or 2019? I did it, I should know it.
well, that's okay. I just, do you know of many schools that have written their own curriculum?
Yes and no. So we used to collect a public pre-K report at the end of every school year, and we would get information like that through that report. We no longer collect it to that extent anyway. We no longer collect that information. So it's tough for me to say with confidence. I imagine, I'm not a betting woman, but if I was, I would bet that many public pre-K programs have teachers that implement their own curriculum. With that said, I'm not confident necessarily, without having spent time in that classroom or spent time with those teachers, that they meet any of these evidence-based definitions, right? So it's not uncommon for us to go to a location and see teachers implementing something that they've created. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it may or may not meet the needs of this evidence-based definition or the needs of the student perhaps. You know, I love Pinterest as much as the next person, but Pinterest isn't a pre-K curriculum, right? Pinterest has a lot of great activities and crafts and ways to enhance and supplement curriculum, but it's not a curriculum. And often we'll see a lot of teachers utilizing that for their day-to-day instructional ideas. So there's like sort of this fine line. With that said, having, oh goodness, it's on the tip of my tongue and it just escaped me. Anyways, it'll come back to me and I'll circle back. But I don't want to move forward without saying that I know for a fact there are a number of well-educated teachers in Maine in pre-K classrooms implementing curriculum and relationship and instructional practices that are of the highest quality and from their own design. So it's a really, really fine line to walk and to sort of prove that it meets this evidence-based criteria.
Thank you. I was asking because our school created ours, and it was, and I'm on the curriculum committee, but I was like, we're creating it. And we had Sue Reed come in to help us. But I always like pulled from other things, like, are we doing this right? You know, I'm not a curriculum coordinator.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard to do that. And often schools that do that, whether it's for curriculum or we see it a lot with their assessment practices, they use the MELDs. So there's a lot of confusion that the MELDs is a curriculum or that the MELDs is an assessment. And that's not true. That's a huge myth in our state. The MELDs are the standards, right, that your curriculum is working to meet. The MELDs are the standards that your assessment is working to meet, right? So those two external tools, those external programs, should align with and address the standards within MELDS. They're three very separate things, for lack of a better word. So yeah, it's a very fine line to create, and a lot of work to create a pre-K curriculum, right?
It's a ridiculous amount of work.
Like,
and we've had like the Great Schools Partnership come in and the district curriculum coordinator. So, you know, lots of trained people helping us, but I'm definitely want to dive into the pre-K for me.
yes.
And yeah. And
yeah, that, I mean, we of course would support that because it's something we created. Like I said, I can't tell you what to do or what not to do. Pre-K for me is, or we're having a training for pre-K for me this summer, August 9th and 10th. Marcy, is that right? 8th or 9th or 10th. It's a Monday, Tuesday. And you're welcome to attend that, even if you're don't plan on implementing it this year. It could provide you with a lot of background information to implement it in the future. We've also hosted and recorded an information session, which is linked on our pre-K for me site. So if you want to shoot me an email after and remind me, and I can send you everything you need to sort of look over it.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. And so similar to pre-K for me, we also wrote and piloted K for me, which is kindergarten for me. And that should be up and available for kindergarten programs this summer. I'm smiling because that's going to be my job, most likely. And teachers will be able to implement K for me next school year. Thank you, Marcy. August 9th and 10th for pre-K for me. So quick question in the chat, should this training be for administrators, not just teachers? Yes, Mary Beth, we always encourage administrators, coaches, anything like that to attend these curriculum trainings that we offer. And not just pre-K for me, even if you're using a purchased curriculum from an outside source, administrators and coaches alike should be part of those instructional trainings.
I have a question, it's Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
Pre-K for me, I've used the resource a lot. I really enjoy it. My question is, with K for me, is it going to be piggybacking pre-K for me in the same kinds of structure, or is it going to look really different? Can you give me a little bit of feedback on that?
Sure can. So K for me does exactly what I want to see. It takes something that was started in pre-K and builds upon it for the next school year. So the experiences that students had in pre-K with pre-K for me are being built on in their kindergarten classroom. So K for me has 4 units of study. So pre-K for me has 6, and they're about 4 to 5 weeks per unit. K for me has 4 units, so they're like 6 to 8 weeks long for each one. And they're similar, like family, construction. I'm not going to name all 4. Our world, something. So they're similar titles as pre-K for me. They still operate very much around the literature that's included in pre-K for me. The literature is as important in K for me. The read alouds, the centers, right? Nice long times for children to experience centers in kindergarten, which is something that many of our kindergarten programs unfortunately have gone away with, right? There are no desks in K for me. There's tables and there's centers and there's spaces for students to interact with and move through. So yeah, so it is very similar. It's more like pre-K for me than not. How's that?
Nicole, the K for me that you're creating, is it something, I'm asking this because I'm on the curriculum committee for our district, is this something that would, I'm sure it does, but like align with a Common Core, that if I was to, because our kindergarten teachers are drowning, and it's like the pre-K that my kids are in, when they go off to K, it's hardly, it just doesn't carry over. There's all desks, no centers. So if I spoke to the right people to try to take just please look at it and stuff, it's something that maybe they could get it to fit,
right?
Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, K for me and pre-K for me are very much interdisciplinary curricula. So they take all content and instruct on it through centers, through interaction, through text, things like that. So pre-K for me is a one and done curriculum. It includes all of, and aligns with all of our math standards, ELA, social and emotional development, visual and performing arts, etc. So if you're utilizing pre-K for me, there's no need to supplement with any other purchased curriculum at all. It's just one and done. However, K for me, while it is still an interdisciplinary whole child approach to instruction in kindergarten, it does not include math. So a program or a classroom would need to supplement with a math program, as well as a phonics program. So those are two areas where kindergarten teachers would have sort of one curriculum, or we're encouraged to call it a program, K for me, and then also supplement in a phonics instruction and a math instruction. So unlike having this program for ELA, this program for math, this program for social and emotional, this program for creative arts, this program for social studies, this program for science, right? And then the assessment tools for each and every one of those, K for me and pre-K for me work to help eliminate that. So it's more of a one-stop shop, especially in pre-K for me. And they are both aligned with all of our updated standards. So the MELDs and all of our content standards for K-12. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so in the interest of time, we have 9 minutes left. So maybe we'll just sort of do the best we can to sort of highlight the next few standards. I think, Marcy, this one was yours.
Yep. So child assessment reporting and conferences, all of this information is in the document and you have links to that. So I'm just going to kind of read through. Research-based assessment is required. It's a tool that is carried out through the program year. And so it builds off children's strengths and goals, and it needs to align with the main early learning development standards, the MELDs. And like Nicole had said in the previous slide, the MELDs is not an assessment tool. It is a tool that leads or lends to development standards in our state, and so they need to align together. There are a few assessment tools out there that we do have crosswalks and alignment for. One of those is Teaching Strategies Gold. And again, we offer guidance on assessment tools to use, not specific ones. We don't endorse specific ones, but there has been that crosswalk that is put together. I apologize if I'm talking fast. I'm now like, oh gosh, we have no more time. So this is how my mind works. So considerations to choosing an assessment tool that are really important are strategies that lend themselves to children's strengths. So you're going to want to have something, a quality tool that includes observation, work samples, anecdotal notes, checklists, photographs, and videos. And those assessment tools are also used to inform parent conferences. Conferences and sort of narrative reports around student work and development, strength-based and goal-based, are what we're looking for in a quality program, as opposed to a typical sort of report card with, you know, a mark or a number or a letter or a one sentence. There, you know, this is what we're doing, that sort of thing. It really should be an informed conversation with the parent, or a narrative written piece of information that, again, is strength-based around the student and goal-based. Okay, I think that was, and there is a lot more information. Also, page 25 in the appendices and page 18 offer the resources and examples of other assessment tools that are out there. Not all of them, but a few other ones. So next we go into classroom environment, and I'm going to run through this one a little bit quickly. There's a lot to it. It's a 2-pager in the document. It starts on page 4. And so we know that a high quality classroom environment is welcome and organized and ADA compliant, and also set up very intentionally. The intentionality, it lends to being a third teacher in the classroom. So if your materials and your furniture and your boundary markers and all of the things that are listed down below are done intentionally, it can actually act as a third teacher, keeping children in spaces, keeping materials in spaces, that sort of thing. It's very important to understand that materials need to shift throughout the year. So the materials that you start with in September should not be the materials that are there in January or April. They should move with the children's interests and their development throughout the year. And also, it's very important that materials are age and developmentally appropriate so you can meet the children where they're at and then continue that shift throughout the year. In the document on page 4 and 5, you will see information and sort of explanations for all of these checkmarked points to consider when you're setting up a classroom environment, boundary lines, that sort of thing, line of sight, so children are easily seen and active supervision is easy to obtain. Culture and having artifacts around different cultures of families and that you have in your classroom provides ownership to the children and their families into that program, which is very important. Travel spaces, sort of thinking about a runway style where the middle of the room or side of the room is open for walking space as opposed to walking around furniture lends to a lot more safety, and wide open spaces around travel spaces. Materials, again, age and developmentally appropriate, shifting throughout the year. And then stimulation, whether a classroom is overstimulated with too many things on the wall, too many bright things, too many materials, and then also understimulated with kind of none of that, or too few materials, or nothing, anything that's not engaging the student or expanding their learning.
So before I move on real quick, I've said this strategy before, but I'll say it again because I say it as often as I can. My favorite recommendation for teachers is when you've gone back into your classrooms and you've set it up the way you think will meet the needs of your children in terms of walking spaces and the way materials and furniture are set up. Before your students ever step foot into your classroom, step back to your door, to your entrance, take your phone and put it on video and hold it at whatever level you think your 4-year-old students are height-wise. So for me, that's like, well, it's probably like my chin because I'm short, but like, hip or stomach high, and just walk around your classroom. Just enter your classroom with the video going. Walk in and out of your centers, walk in and out of your rest area, walk it, throughout the sinks and throughout your space, and then watch it and see what it looks like from the level of your student, right? Because we're up here seeing things and setting up things so that we can see and hear students regardless of where they are in the classroom. But your students are accessing it at a much different level physically. So take a moment before students come in and sort of practice doing that and see how it looks and how it flows. And then, make changes if you feel like it's necessary. This continues environment.
Yep. So the second piece, and again, I'm not going to explain all of these, but there are some explanations and more information in the document. But intentional classroom environments definitely help with behavior management and productivity in a classroom. So if you have a visual daily schedule that teachers are running through consistently once or twice a day, visual list of expectations or rules as a classroom and also in centers are very they're consistently reinforced and talked about with the students, so they know what's happening, they're not confused. Center limits, meaning 4 children are allowed in the the dramatic play area can accommodate 4 children at one time, and having a visual that has the number 4 or 4 children, or a visual that children will understand, and then it's consistently talked about and reinforced. Centers are also labeled visually with either photos and the word easel with a picture of an easel, that sort of thing. And then boundary markers and stop signs around maybe like a teacher area. This is the teacher area where they keep their things to get ready, and then the child area. So we were going to do a quick activity, but I'm going to ask you to actually do this on your own when you have a chance. So on pages 26 and 27 of the guidebook, on Appendix D, there is actually a 2-page environmental checklist. And what I'd like you to do on your own time is kind of read through that, reflect on where you are in your own classrooms with the materials and things that are listed there, and then, or think about future classrooms that you may be building, and just kind of take a minute to see how those all come together.
So I'm going to stop us there for today because the rest of the items you can see as I sort of scroll here are lengthy and deserve our time and discussion. So I think we should start next week, or I'm going to propose this anyway, to start next week with daily schedule, and then move through and continue with student support. So I think if we aim to spend the first 20, 25 minutes or so on June 23rd with the rest of today's items, and then continue June 23rd with student support, that might be better suited. So I'm not going to share the rest of these just yet. Feel free to start on page 5 and review. Not needed, totally up to you. But I do also just wanted to make sure I was able to post the certificate for today. And I'm going to put this in the chat box as well, because I don't want to hold you a minute longer than I need to. So in the chat box is a direct link to the 1-hour certificate. If you have a smartphone or an iPad, you can open your camera and aim your camera at this black QR code. You should see a pop-up for your web browser. I use Safari on my phone.